And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Rissa Miller with us, folklorist, historian, and paranormal researcher whose lifelong fascination with the supernatural began in childhood. She'll tell you about that after witnessing a ghost during a family trip to York, England. That moment sparked her belief that history and hauntings are inseparable and that the dead leave stories way behind. Now she investigates America's haunted past through cemetery symbolism, Victorian death culture, nocturnal folklore, and deep historical research. Her book is called Room with a Boo. It's a children's book. Rissa, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, George. It's exciting to be here.
That childhood encounter must have scared the living daylights out of you.
Actually, it did not.
Really? Why?
I have a very interesting family background. I was never taught to be afraid of hauntings or anything associated with ghosts. I was just taught that they were there doing their thing and, to give them their respect, and that was that. So I wasn't afraid. And I wasn't even sure in the moment that it happened that I was experiencing a ghost. I was 8 years old, and as you said, we were on a family trip to York, England. And it had been a long day of, my parents dragging me around sightseeing and that kind of a family trip. We were in an Italian restaurant called Marmaduke's, and I was upstairs going to find the bathroom, and I saw a young man, and he looked incredibly sad, and it looked like he was wearing some kind of like a historic costume. And what struck me wasn't the idea to be afraid. It was the fact that he was so incredibly sad. And I turned back around. I went to go get my mom. I said, Mom, there's a young man upstairs. I think he needs help. Come with me. And we got there, and he was gone. And, we had been right by the steps the whole time. He couldn't have walked past. Oof. So we went and found the server and asked about him, and her face kind of said it all. She was like, you saw Marmaduke. So this restaurant, Marmaduke's, was haunted by one of the most famous ghosts in York, England, Marmaduke Buckle. Sadly, he took his own life. He lived at a time where being different or physically disabled was not as easily accepted. And there are many different variations of his story, but it turns out that, to save his family from, how do I say this nicely, the difficulty of dealing with his life as a disabled person, he decided to take his own life. And he was a residual haunting, which, as you know, is sort of like a scar on time-space, right?
How old was he, Rissa, when he took his life?
17 or 18, which would have been a grown man back in, the early 1700s when he was alive.
But he had his whole life ahead of him.
He did. It was really sad. And the thing that surprised the server so much is there's a whole sequence, apparently, to when you see Marmaduke. And I only saw part of it. I didn't see the part where he actually hangs himself. And she was just so shocked that I had seen him at all that I wasn't scared, and that for whatever reason I missed that part of the residual. And I did. For whatever reason I walked away to go get my mom, and so we came back. Perhaps the whole scene had played out. And I didn't know the story of Marmaduke at that time, but it created in me this fascination with who was he? What was his life about? How did it happen that he decided to end his life? And from that moment on, I became a big fan of history as well. It wasn't just the fascination of seeing a ghost. It was understanding his story that really, really, was the pivot for me.
It's amazing you witnessed the sadness on this entity.
Yes, I'm definitely a person that I feel like there's a lot of emotion attached to hauntings. And I know that not everybody feels that way, and that's okay. But when I am dealing with hauntings in my line of work, I get this strong impression that the energy of emotion is a big part of it, especially with residuals. But intelligence as well. But there's this overwhelming feeling around most hauntings. And a lot of people get wrapped up in their own fear, and they don't get into the actual, how do I want to say it? The actual emotion that is causing the haunting in the first place.
Rissa, how often are people seeing Marmaduke around that restaurant?
Well, the restaurant's not there anymore. There's a restaurant there now called La Piazza, and it's still an Italian restaurant, ironically. Now, it's been a number of years since I was 8 years old, George.
Yeah.
But I don't know the owners of La Piazza, but I do know Marmaduke's story is one of the more famous ghost stories of York, England. He's definitely a spirit that a lot of people see, and I just happen to be one of them.
Why do you think you did not see the full fruition of the hanging?
That's a great question. Maybe just dumb luck. Maybe my own spirit guide spun me around just in time to make it interesting and not tragic.
Maybe he didn't want a little child to see this.
Perhaps. Yeah, perhaps.
After it was all said and done, how did you handle it?
I needed to know more. I've always been incredibly curious, and you know, I probably drove my parents nuts the next day because I was like, I have to know who he was and what was he doing here and what was his life about and when did he live and what was it like during that time. And I had so many questions, and that was basically how I processed it. It didn't even occur to me to be afraid. It just occurred to me to want to understand his story.
Did you ever see him again?
No, I haven't been back, but it's definitely a goal I have to get back to York, England, and to go back to that restaurant.
Have you seen other ghosts since then?
I haven't seen. I have definitely experienced, but that is the only full apparition I've ever witnessed, and it was enough to change my life.
Are most encounters, Rissa, during the daytime, nighttime? When do you think they happen?
Oh, I think they happen all the time, George. I think movies and TV shows teach us they happen at night because that's a way cooler story, right?
Scarier at night, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a lot spookier to tell a ghost story in the dark. However, I think hauntings happen all the time. You know, there was this great article that came out in the New York Times during the pandemic that people were at home all day and suddenly they realized their houses were haunted. Just because they're normally too busy and they're zipping around and they didn't have any stillness. Suddenly, back in 2020, when we were all home all day and the world got real quiet, people were like, oh, dang, there's a ghost in my house. But, you know, I think it's also that we as humans feel more vulnerable at night. We don't see as well in the dark. I mean, we're not like cats, right? We don't see as well in the dark. There's this spookiness to the dark. And it just kind of naturally becomes a thing that we'll slot anything scary into the category of putting it in the dark. And I also believe, just like I said with the 2020 example, in the dark, we tend to hear things more. So I'm on the East Coast right now. The house is completely quiet. If there were footsteps on the stairs right now, I'd certainly hear them.
We'd hear them in the background.
Right? You probably would. But during the day when there are cars outside and children playing and dogs barking, I wouldn't even notice it.
Rissa, what is it about old places, old houses, old buildings that somehow create more of these sightings?
Absolutely. You know, they definitely do. I don't, first of all, I want to say clearly that I don't think that hauntings only happen in historic buildings. I think that hauntings can happen anywhere.
I agree.
And I think that it's a perception thing. So when you're looking at a house or a building that's hundreds of years old or even 50 years old, you see its survivorship, right? You see that it has survived over time, and it sort of activates your imagination, especially if it was around during the Victorian era. And because Victorian ghosts are kind of all the thing. But I think when you're looking at an old building, you can imagine the lives there. You can imagine how many families have lived there, have laughed there, how many people might have died there. and it just creates more stories.
It makes you wonder. We're going to take a short break, Rissa, but we'll be back to talk more about hauntings with you in just a moment with Rissa Miller on Coast to Coast AM.
Oh my God.
Never miss a detail on a
She's
show
so
or a
great.
guest.
I
Sign
love
up for
her.
the